Chapter 1, Monday Morning Bombshell. I should have known something was off the moment my badge blinked red. It was a Monday, cold, quiet, early. The kind of morning that felt like a reset. But as I stood outside the elevator bay on the 17th floor, tapping my access badge against the panel for the fourth time, the reset started to feel more like a shutout. The project suite, my usual destination, didn't let me in. I checked my calendar. No cancellations. No alerts. I even refreshed my email. Nothing. So I took the long way around, through the east corridor and into the main operations wing, and flagged down Andrea, one of our floor admins. "Hey, Andrea," I said with a smile I didn't feel. "Any chance there's a badge update I missed?" She blinked at me, sympathetic but clearly caught off guard.
"Oh, Logan, I think your project access was pulled.
IT sent a list on Friday. I assumed you knew." I didn't. And the way she looked at me, like she was bracing for me to react, told me she knew that too. "No worries," I said, careful to keep my voice even. "I'll check in with my manager." I didn't check in. I opened my laptop, logged into our secure dashboard, and immediately spotted the change. My name had been quietly removed from the Convergence Initiative, the high-stakes systems rollout I'd led for the last 6 months. It was my workstream. My architecture. My team. Now? All reassigned. And sitting at the top of the new approval chain? Eric Nolan. My wife's brother. To the outside world, Eric was charming. Articulate. Good with executive slide decks and handshakes. He had a clean rep, not because he earned it, but because no one ever looked too closely. But I knew better. And seeing his name above a plan I had written, after being locked out of the room, told me one thing: he'd made a move. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. It wasn't just the demotion. It was the silence around it. No meeting. No explanation. No digital trail, just absence. That's when my inbox pinged. From HR Operations. Subject: Request for 15-minute sync, confidential. I didn't move. Because that was the moment I knew. This wasn't an oversight. This was a setup. Chapter 2, The Family Name. By the time I got home that evening, I'd rehearsed the conversation in my head at least a dozen times. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was calculating, trying to figure out how deeply this went, how far Eric had managed to slither before I even realized the ground beneath me was shifting. But the one part I hadn't figured out was how to tell Elise. She was in the kitchen when I walked in, barefoot, hair tied up, scrolling something on her tablet while dinner simmered on the stove. The house smelled like garlic and rosemary. Comforting. Normal. Too normal. "How was your day?" she asked, not looking up. I hesitated for a beat too long. That's all it took for her to notice. She set the tablet down and turned, brow furrowing. "Logan?" I took a slow breath. I got pulled off the Convergence project. Her mouth parted slightly. "What? Why?" "They didn't say. My badge wouldn't scan. And then HR emailed me about a confidential meeting tomorrow." I watched the confusion ripple across her face. Genuine. Not defensive, not yet. "That doesn't make any sense," she said. "You've been running that thing for months. What does HR want?" I shrugged. "I'm guessing it has something to do with Eric." And just like that, the air in the kitchen shifted. "Elise," I said gently, "his name was at the top of the new project leadership list. And the accusations HR flagged? They line up a little too neatly with things only someone inside my own team would know. Someone who wants me out." She crossed her arms, eyes narrowing. "Are you saying my brother's sabotaging you?" "I'm saying it's worth asking," I replied. "Especially considering his history." She flinched. We didn't talk about Eric's history often. Not the last time he got caught manipulating performance reviews to push out a peer. Not the time he nearly tanked a contract with inflated deliverables and tried to blame the client. Elise always made excuses. Said he was under pressure. Misunderstood. The youngest. The one who never quite fit in. But this time, the collateral damage was me. Maybe you're wrong, she said quietly. Maybe, I replied. But if I'm right, and we don't look now, by the time it's clear, it'll be too late. She didn't answer. Just turned back to the stove and stirred the pot, like it would keep something from boiling over. Chapter 3, The Accusation. The HR conference room was colder than usual. Not temperature-wise, though the air conditioning was humming like it always did, but in the way silence pressed down once the door closed behind me. 2 chairs. 1 folder. No coffee offered. Just Ms. Dillard from HR, her smile thin and her eyes unreadable. Thanks for coming, Logan, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. I nodded and sat, folding my hands to keep them from fidgeting. I wanted to talk about some concerns that have been raised, she began, opening the folder. It seems there's been a perception of inconsistent conduct within the Convergence Initiative team. Inconsistent how? There have been a few notes, submitted anonymously, suggesting you may have shared proprietary materials with external contacts without authorization. There's also a claim that you rerouted credit for deliverables to your name that were initially drafted by a peer. I blinked. Not because I was surprised, but because hearing the exact lies laid out in HR language made my jaw tense. That's not true, I said calmly. I've done nothing outside of protocol, and any collaboration I've had has been fully documented within our system. I understand. This isn't a formal disciplinary conversation, yet. Just a preliminary inquiry. But given the nature of the claims, leadership felt it best to reassign you from the initiative while we evaluate the situation. I almost laughed. Reassign. Evaluate. Preliminary inquiry. They'd pulled me from my own project and called it a courtesy. May I see the documentation? I asked. Ms. Dillard hesitated. It's still being compiled. But one thing that did come up was a strategy deck you submitted last month. There's a timestamp discrepancy, and a claim that it closely mirrors another version submitted by a peer days earlier. Let me guess, I said. Eric Nolan? She looked down, trying not to flinch. That was all the confirmation I needed. I'd like to formally request access to the original version history of that deck, I said. Our drive logs every edit. I can prove authorship down to the keystroke. Her pen hovered. Then, reluctantly, she wrote it down. I stood to leave. My voice was steady, but colder now. Thank you for the meeting. But I suggest you pull every version of that file before you make any decisions. I didn't wait for a response. Because the moment I stepped out of that room, I knew 2 things. Eric had gone for blood. And now, I was going for proof. Chapter 4, Elise's Doubt. Elise was already home when I walked through the door. She was curled on the couch, laptop open on her knees, but her eyes weren't moving. She wasn't reading. Just staring through the screen like it might give her answers I couldn't. Hey, I said softly. She looked up. How'd it go? I tossed my keys in the bowl by the door and sat on the edge of the coffee table across from her. Exactly how I expected. HR wouldn't say who filed the complaint, but the language? The accusation? It was crafted. Thought through. Timed. She didn't say anything. I reached into my bag and pulled out a printout. This is the activity log from the strategy deck they said I stole. My login shows edits going back 4 weeks. I built the original. Every diagram, every cost projection, every note. But Eric submitted a version 2 days before the deadline, clean, polished, and nearly identical. She took the paper, but didn't read it right away. I leaned forward. HR grilled me on process protocol. Tried to keep it vague, internal concerns, collaborative boundary issues. I kept my answers clean. Didn't accuse anyone by name. But after that meeting, I went straight back to my desk and pulled everything I could from the shared drive archives. Her eyes flicked up. You kept version logs? It's automatic. Most people don't bother looking at them unless there's a problem. But I did. Every version was there. Mine. Eric's. And every timestamp in between. She finally looked at the paper. Her brow furrowed, but her voice was cautious. Are you sure it was Eric? Could it have been someone on your team? I stared at her for a beat. You think I'd accuse your brother without being sure? I don't know, she whispered. This is big, Logan. If you're wrong. I'm not, I said, firmer than I intended. I've let things slide before. Little things. Like when he downplayed my Q3 numbers in front of your dad. Or when he conveniently forgot to include me in a client call we both prepped for. I didn't make it a war. But this is different. She looked down again. You're asking me to believe he sabotaged you, she said, on purpose. That he's risking his career. His reputation. I leaned in, voice low but steady. Are you asking me to just stand by and let him sabotage me? Make me look like I stole his work? You want me to let him destroy my career just because he's your brother? He's risking mine, I shot back. And he's already succeeding. Her eyes welled, just slightly. She hated being in the middle. Hated the idea that someone in her family could be capable of something like this. But the silence between us said what she couldn't. She was starting to believe me. I need to talk to him, she finally said. No, I said quietly. Not yet. Not until I have everything. Because belief wasn't enough. I needed undeniable. Chapter 5, The Whisper Network. By Thursday, the air around me had changed. People still smiled in passing. Still waved in morning meetings. But there was something off about it, too polite. Too careful. Like they weren't quite sure where I stood anymore. Or where they should stand with me. I noticed it first when I walked into the analytics sink and saw my name missing from the agenda. It was a subtle omission, easy to brush off. But then it happened again in the next meeting. And again in the client prep call. 3 rooms I used to anchor, now I was just sitting on the edge, nodding along while someone else presented my frameworks. Eric's frameworks now, I guessed. No one said anything outright. That was the genius of it. There were no public accusations. No shouting matches in conference rooms. Just the slow drip of exclusion. The kind of silence that builds like static. The kind that says someone has whispered something, and it might be true. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Then Priya caught up to me in the hallway. Got a second? She asked, glancing over her shoulder like someone might see her talking to me. We ducked into a break room that had been empty since pre-COVID. She leaned against the counter and folded her arms. I don't know what's going on, she said, but I figured you should know, Eric's been floating things. What kind of things? She hesitated. That you cut corners? Took shortcuts with the procurement modeling. That you're difficult to collaborate with. The word volatile was used. A few people heard it in the break area. He made it sound like it came from HR. I exhaled slowly, jaw tightening. He's poisoning the well, I said. Priya nodded. Quietly. Strategically. And the scary part is, some of them are believing it. Because he's not yelling. He's not dramatic. He's calm. Sympathetic. Just concerned. I shook my head. Concerned enough to take over my project and rewrite my work. She raised a brow. You have proof? I met her eyes. I do now. Her mouth curled, just slightly. Then take your time, Logan. Be smart. Quiet moves. I planned to. Because now I knew what I was dealing with. Eric wasn't impulsive. He was calculating. And if he wanted to turn this into a war of perception, fine. I'd win it with facts. Chapter 6, The Backup Copy and the Choice. There's something about corporate servers that most people don't understand, they're never truly clean. Even when a file's deleted, it lives on. Versions pile up. Edits leave fingerprints. If you know where to look, you can find everything. And I did. I spent most of Friday night in the guest room with my laptop open, eyes burning from the screen glow. Elise had gone to bed hours earlier, saying nothing after dinner except a quiet, good night. She hadn't brought Eric up again. I think she knew I was too far in now to let this go. I wasn't looking for the obvious anymore. I had already printed the version history from the strategy deck, the one with my name stripped and his signature slapped on top. What I wanted now was the transition gap. The moments in between. Who viewed what? When? From what device? The logs didn't disappoint. At 11:14 p.m., the night before Eric's submission, his login pinged into my personal draft folder. Not the team folder. Mine. He didn't just borrow formatting or crib a few bullet points, he copied the entire file, rebranded it, and emailed it to himself from a personal address. Sloppy. Even worse, the server recorded access metadata, device ID, timestamp, IP address. He left a trail like an amateur. I stitched the pieces together into a digital portfolio. Screenshots. Logs. File properties. A playback of version rollbacks showing my initial build dates compared to his. All timestamped. All verifiable. By the time the clock hit 2 a.m., I had every receipt I needed. But I didn't stop there. I checked his email alias on our internal Slack export, and sure enough, he'd messaged 2 project leads last week. Logan's been struggling with convergence lately. I'm thinking of stepping in so things don't spiral. Spiral. That was the word he used. It wasn't just theft. It was narrative building. He was creating a version of me that looked unstable, out of depth, and easily replaced. And if I hadn't caught it in time, he might have succeeded. I leaned back in the chair, stretching my neck. My pulse had slowed. My mind was clear. This wasn't just about reputation anymore. It was about control. And I was taking mine back. Saturday morning, I found Elise sitting on the back patio, nursing a mug of tea and staring at nothing. She didn't hear me come out. The screen door creaked as I stepped onto the deck, and her shoulders tightened just slightly. She turned her head, not all the way, and said, "I heard you typing until almost 3. I found what I needed," I replied, sliding into the chair across from her. Eric accessed my folder. Not the team drive. Mine. He copied the entire strategy file from my draft, stripped my name, and sent it to himself. I have the metadata. She didn't flinch. That surprised me. You're sure? Positive. I even found Slack messages he sent to 2 project leads. He's been planting the idea that I'm unraveling. That he's stepping in to keep the project from falling apart. She closed her eyes for a second, the mug still pressed to her lips but untouched. "Elise," I said gently, "you knew something wasn't right. You just didn't want to see it." "That's not fair," she snapped, "too fast. He's my brother. I'm not blind, Logan. But this. What you're saying? It's deliberate. Calculated." "It is," I said. "And it's not the first time. He's done this before, to people who didn't have the resources or documentation to fight back. You've told me yourself he's always been good at playing both sides." She set her mug down, hard enough that it sloshed. "I asked him once if he ever felt bad about that performance review mess a few years ago," she said. "He looked me straight in the eye and said, they weren't built for this place anyway. Like it was mercy." My stomach twisted. "That's how he sees me, Elise." She finally met my gaze. "What are you going to do?" I'm going to let HR finish their inquiry, I said carefully. Then I'm going to submit my packet of evidence through official counsel. Let them see who's unstable. Let the narrative collapse in his own voice. She was quiet for a long time. Then, my parents are going to take his side. I nodded. I know. And if it comes down to you or him, at work or at home, you're not backing down? I held her gaze. Not this time. She looked away. And whispered, good. Chapter 7, Quiet Allies. Monday morning came with a different kind of silence. The kind you feel before a storm hits. People in the hallway looked through me. Conversations paused when I entered a room. The nods, the quick smiles, gone. I'd been marked, and not with anything official. No HR flag. No public announcement. Just the quiet weight of suspicion. And it all pointed in one direction. Eric's whispers were working. I kept my head down through the morning meetings, speaking only when necessary. But by lunch, I found an envelope slid under my office door. No name. No handwriting. Just a printout inside, a screenshot of Slack messages. Not mine. His. If we can shift the convergence lead now, I think I can own the Q3 rollout. Logan's been soft on the data story. We need sharper wins. It was timestamped 2 weeks before I was pulled from the project. I stared at the printout for a long time, then looked out the office window. And saw Priya. She wasn't looking at me, just walking down the corridor with the takeaway coffee, crisp and unreadable as ever. But something in me clicked. I stepped into the hallway. Priya, I called. She stopped. Tilted her head slightly. I think I owe you a thank you, I said quietly, holding up the envelope. She didn't answer right away. Just looked around, then motioned toward the stairwell. We met on the landing between floors, a place too narrow for cameras and too loud for whispers to carry. I didn't send it, she said. But I know who did. That's enough, I replied. You were the one who told me to check the drive logs, weren't you? Back when you said I should look at what's been left open too long. She allowed herself a small, tired smile. Eric's been pulling threads from other people's work for years. Always 1 degree removed. Just enough to look clean if anyone asks. But this time. She shook her head. This time, he got lazy. Or overconfident. Same thing. I hesitated. Why are you telling me this? Because I've been waiting for someone else to notice. And because if you go down for this, it'll happen again, to someone else. I nodded, slower this time. HR won't act without pressure, she warned. They need more than internal complaints. They're about to get it. She didn't ask how. Didn't have to. When she left, she handed me the coffee she hadn't touched. I like seeing you fight, she said. Don't wait too long. Chapter 8, Elise's Parent Strike. Dinner at Elise's parents' place was never casual. Her mother called it family time, but it always felt more like a quarterly performance review. Their home was as curated as their conversations, polished granite counters, symmetrical centerpieces, framed degrees positioned just so behind the dining table. Even the salad was arranged like it had a PR team. I wore the nice shirt. The neutral smile. The practiced restraint. Eric was already there, of course. Calm. Charming. Pouring wine like nothing in the world could touch him. I caught the glance he gave me when I walked in, that subtle flicker of amusement, like a man watching a fuse burn slowly toward its end. We made it to the main course before the gloves came off. So, Elise's father said, dabbing the corner of his mouth with a napkin, we heard there's been some turbulence at your office, Logan. My fork paused midair. Elise shifted beside me, her spine straightening. Turbulence? I echoed. Well, Eric mentioned there were some internal concerns. Miscommunications. He didn't want to elaborate, of course. Very classy, if you ask me. But we do worry about how these things affect the company culture. Elise's mother leaned in. Is everything okay at work, dear? Or are things slipping through the cracks? I looked across the table. Eric didn't flinch. Didn't smirk. He just kept cutting into his roasted chicken with surgical precision. I'm curious, I said, calmly. Did Eric tell you what those concerns were? Or just hint enough to let your imagination do the rest? Elise, her father said, pivoting, you didn't say anything about this. Because it's not what you think, she replied tightly. Eric set down his fork. Let's not make this a family fight. I'm sure Logan's just overwhelmed. These cross-functional projects can be a lot. I turned to him, smile tight. Funny. You didn't seem too overwhelmed when you took credit for the convergence deck. The room went still. Her parents blinked. Eric let out a small laugh, like I'd made a poor joke. Elise, her mother said, voice brittle. Tell me this isn't true. Elise hesitated, just long enough for the truth to find oxygen. Then, he has evidence. Evidence of what? Her father snapped. Of hard work? Collaboration? Eric has always supported you, Logan. If he took initiative, it's because he saw a gap. Maybe you were falling behind? Eric leaned back in his chair, smug now. Elise, I said, still watching her father. This is what you meant, isn't it? When you said they'd take his side. Her jaw tightened. Can we just eat? She muttered. But we already had. They'd eaten the story Eric fed them, and licked the plate clean. So I said nothing more. Not yet. Chapter 9, Confrontation at the Table. I didn't plan to speak. Not tonight. Not here. But Eric pushed the last button. Look, he said, swirling his wine like a man on vacation, it's obvious Logan's under a lot of pressure. We've all had rough quarters. Maybe instead of blame, we focus on solutions. You know. Teamwork. Teamwork. That word hit like a slap. Elise's parents nodded, eating it up. Her mother reached for her glass, saying something about grace under fire. Her father muttered about loyalty and optics. Eric leaned back in his chair, every bit the composed professional, a man falsely accused, unfairly targeted, already forgiven. And that's when I pushed my chair back. Not loud. Just enough. Elise looked up. Logan. But I was already pulling out the folded documents from my coat pocket. I set them gently on the table like a dealer laying down a royal flush. What's this? Her father asked, frowning. Receipts, I said. From the shared drive. From Slack. From the metadata on the convergence file Eric submitted 2 weeks ago. Eric's face didn't move. Not at first. But his eyes flicked to the documents. Fast. Then away. I don't know what that is, he said flatly. It's your login. Your IP address. Your access history. And your Slack messages, where you told people I was spiraling and that you planned to step in. Her parents stared at the papers like they were written in another language. Elise, say something, her mother hissed. Elise stood. Not slowly. Not dramatically. Just with purpose. He's telling the truth, she said. I've seen the logs. The files. I was the one who suggested he compile it all. Her mother's jaw dropped. I didn't want to believe it either, Elise added. But the more I looked, the clearer it became. Eric didn't just copy Logan's work. He tried to frame him. Her father's brow furrowed. Logan. Why would you bring this to us like this? Why are you trying to make Eric look bad? I blinked. Make him look bad? I repeated. You think this is about optics? I took a breath, forcing calm into my voice. I'm not trying to ruin Eric, I said. But I'm not going to sit back and let him destroy my career just to keep the family peace. That man, your son, has gone out of his way to sabotage me. He's not just lying to HR. He's rewriting my reputation one whisper at a time. Her mother opened her mouth, but I wasn't finished. Tell me something, I said. When I lose my job because your golden child tanked my credibility, are you going to step in and pay my bills? Cover my mortgage? Explain to Elise why her husband can't provide any more because you all wanted to keep the peace? They looked stunned. Offended, maybe. But I didn't care. Eric stood, mouth twitching. You have no idea what you're doing. I do, I said. Finally. He pushed his chair back harder than necessary and walked out. Not a word. Not a glance back. Elise's parents were frozen, caught between disbelief and dawning embarrassment. I didn't ask for an apology. I didn't need one. The facts had done their job. Chapter 10, The Anonymous Drop. The next morning, I walked into the office with the calm of a man carrying dynamite no one could see. I didn't speak to Eric. Didn't even glance at him when we passed in the hall. He wore his usual confidence, white button-down, smirk just sharp enough to suggest everything was back in his control. But that smirk would be gone soon. Back at my desk, I closed the door and opened the private folder I'd labeled failsafe. Inside, everything. Screenshots. Timestamps. Drive logs. Slack messages. A side-by-side comparison of the strategy decks, one I wrote, one Eric submitted. Even the envelope Priya had slipped under my door, scanned and digitally notarized. It wasn't just one incident anymore. It was a pattern. A profile. A case. I zipped the entire folder into a clean package and opened a blank email. No name. No traceable address. Just a subject line. Ethics risk, internal pattern. I paused over the recipient line, then typed in the direct emails for the VP of Strategy, the Director of People Operations, and the Internal Risk Compliance Lead. 3 people. No overlap with Eric's department. No leaks. No delays. No one who owed him anything. The message was short. This documentation details a persistent pattern of misrepresentation, project interference, and professional misconduct by a member of your leadership track. All evidence included has been timestamped, verified, and compiled independently. This is not a personal dispute. This is an integrity concern. I trust you'll handle it accordingly. I hit send. No fireworks. No explosion. Just the soft whoosh of years of silent sabotage entering the bloodstream of the company's executive core. Then I leaned back in my chair and waited. Eric thought he'd buried me under rumors and rerouted credits. He forgot one thing. I work in strategy. And strategy never fires its shot until it knows exactly where it will land. Chapter 11, The Emergency Meeting. By 10:03 a.m., Eric's door was closed. By 10:17, it opened, and 2 senior compliance officers stepped inside without knocking. By 10:19, it closed again. The energy on the floor shifted like a sudden pressure drop before a storm. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Browsers minimized with quiet clicks. No one dared glance toward the conference wing. I kept my screen open, eyes steady, hands still. But inside, I was counting the beats. The first domino had tipped. The chain reaction had begun. At 10:41, my inbox pinged. You've been added to a temporary task force, Strategic Operations Oversight. First meeting today at 3 p.m. Executive Wing. NDA required. No subject line. No sender I recognized. But the signature at the bottom told me everything I needed. Elena Cross, VP, People Operations. Elena wasn't known for formalities. If she was involved, it meant 2 things: things had escalated fast, and whatever came next would be surgical. I stared at the message, then toward the hallway, just as Eric stepped out of his office. He looked different. Not undone, Exactly, but rattled. His tie was askew. His collar loosened like he'd started a sentence and lost the rest. He walked past me without making eye contact. Or maybe he saw me and just didn't know how to look. The whispers traveled faster than email. Did you hear? Anonymous report. Someone said there's a full dossier. A pattern of misconduct. High level. By noon, HR's usual rhythm had stalled. The director of internal risk left the building looking like she'd forgotten how doors worked. And Eric? He was called into a second meeting before lunch. He didn't return that day. At 2:58 p.m., I walked toward the executive conference room with my badge in hand. For the first time in weeks, my pulse was steady. The doors opened. Elena stood just inside, nodding for me to enter. Around the table were 5 people I'd only seen from a distance, the kind who ran things you didn't even know had names. They didn't introduce themselves. Didn't offer coffee or small talk. Mr. Foster, one of them said. Let's start at the beginning. I opened my laptop. Happy to? We went slide by slide. Message by message. The deck was clear, methodical, impossible to dismiss. They leaned in. Asked precise questions. Cross-referenced their notes. When I reached the timeline showing Eric's recurring pattern, submission, sabotage, and self-promotion, they fell completely silent. A woman near the center of the table looked up. You've worked with him how long? 3 years, I said. And you've documented this behavior across how many projects? 6. That I can prove. They nodded, slowly. One man tapped his pen against the edge of the table, thoughtful. No one challenged a single point. When the meeting ended, Elena waited until the others had cleared out. Then she walked me to the elevator herself. Keep your phone close, she said. Should I be nervous? She raised an eyebrow. Do you like promotions? Depends. Will I still get to drink terrible coffee and work late? She smiled. You'll just be doing it from a nicer office. The elevator doors slid closed. I exhaled. Checkmate was coming. Chapter 12, Elise draws the line. Eric didn't answer the door the first time she knocked. Elise stood there anyway, on the steps of his condo, arms folded against the autumn chill, phone in her pocket still showing the missed calls from their parents. She hadn't returned them. Not yet. Eventually, the door creaked open. Eric filled the frame, disheveled and defensive. If you're here to yell, save it. I've had enough of. I'm not here to yell, Elise cut in. I'm here to be clear. He blinked, uncertain. I covered for you for years, she said. Excused you. Protected you from consequences. Lied to people I loved because it was easier than admitting who you really are. Eric scoffed. This again. No, this is the last time, she said. You went after Logan. You sabotaged him. Lied to HR. Lied to our parents. And when I finally saw the evidence, you didn't even try to deny it. You just doubled down like always. Eric crossed his arms. You're married to him. Of course you'd take his side. I didn't take his side. I saw the truth, and I stood with it. He looked away, jaw tight. Why him, Eric? She asked, voice low but unwavering. Why did it have to be Logan? You've done this to colleagues before, but this time. You went after family. Was it really just about control? Or did you hate that someone finally saw through you? His expression flickered. For a split second, the mask slipped. He was never supposed to stay, Eric muttered. He was supposed to fade out, not become competition. Elise stared at him like she was seeing a stranger. You torched your own integrity to stop someone who never once tried to take anything from you, she said. And now you're mad that he didn't let you. I told you last week that you needed help. That you were spiraling. You didn't listen? So now, I'm done. With the excuses. With the damage control. With all of it. You're overreacting. No, she said, eyes sharp. I'm reacting exactly the way I should have years ago. There was silence. A long, heavy one. Then she took a slow breath and stepped back. You can tell Mom and Dad whatever you want. But don't call me. Don't text me. And don't come near Logan again. Elise. She turned without waiting for the rest. He didn't follow. As she walked down the steps and back toward her car, the wind picked up, cold and clean. It stung her eyes, but she welcomed it. She needed to feel something solid. Something that didn't lie. She didn't cry. Not for Eric. Not anymore. Chapter 13, One Level Higher. Promotion day at Cinertech was usually a low-key affair, quiet emails, a few polite congratulations, and maybe an overpriced cake in the break room if someone remembered. Not this time. The org chart update hit inboxes just before 9 a.m., and within minutes, the floor was buzzing. Not loudly, more like a sharp hum just under the surface. The kind of tension that made people lean in at their desks, whisper in the hallways, and glance over their shoulders to see who'd be looking back. I didn't open the chart right away. I already knew. The night before, Elena had called. Her voice had been calm, clipped, almost clinical. But there was a smile buried somewhere in her phrasing. We'd like to offer you the new strategic director role, she'd said. It comes with cross-functional oversight and a dotted line review of compliance for your division. Translation: I'd now be reviewing the processes Eric had manipulated for years. Reviewing, and rewriting them. I'd simply said, happy to accept. So that morning, when the chart dropped, I let it sit in my inbox for a moment. Let the ripple carry itself down the hallway. Then I walked past Eric's desk. He was already seated, stiff, staring at his monitor like it had personally betrayed him. The sunlight from the window hit the screen at an angle, and I could see the reflection of the chart open in full screen. His name was there. But not in bold. Not in a new department. Not with a promotion. Just unchanged. Except for one thing. Now, 3 levels above him, centered at the top of a redesigned vertical, was mine. He didn't say a word when I passed. Didn't even blink. But his jaw flexed. His knuckles whitened around his mouth. I didn't stop. Didn't smirk. Didn't gloat. Just walked on, steady and unbothered, the way he never imagined I could. And maybe that was the real promotion? Not the title. Not the office. But knowing I'd taken every hit, kept the receipts, and earned my way above the man who tried to erase me. No shortcuts. No sabotage. Just facts. And the facts had finally won. Epilogue, permanent record. The office felt different now. Not louder. Not brighter. Just clearer. Like the air had shifted and whatever heaviness used to hang over my desk had finally lifted. I still kept my head down, still worked late when I needed to. But now, when people passed me in the hallway, they didn't look through me. They looked to me. The new oversight team met every Tuesday. My badge got me into floors I used to only see in training videos. My name showed up in meetings that never would have included me 6 months ago. And Eric? He stayed exactly where he was. Until he didn't. 2 weeks after the org chart update, he was reassigned, quietly, without announcement. No more client-facing work. No more strategy. No more visibility. By month's end, he was placed on a developmental improvement track, a phrase everyone recognized as code for, get your act together, or get out. He lost his bonus. Lost his team. Lost the little empire he'd built on half-truths and perfectly timed sabotage. The whispers about him had quieted, not because people forgot, but because no one needed to say it anymore. The truth had a way of settling in. Permanent. Undeniable. I never did make a grand speech. Never rubbed it in. Never sent one of those gloating just circling back emails. I didn't have to. The paper trail spoke louder than I ever could. It lived in forwarded emails. In compliance logs. In Elena's short but precise memos. In the audit trail that couldn't be deleted. Eric had written his downfall with every falsified edit and whispered smear campaign. All I did was hold up a mirror. And when the smoke cleared, I was still standing, promoted, steady, and documented. Not because I fought dirtier. But because I didn't flinch. The files are still there. Locked, dated, read into record. Not revenge. Just the truth. And now? It's permanent.
Thanks so much for watching. If you love a good revenge story, or if you've ever dreamed of getting the last word without saying much at all, you're in the right place. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new savage ending. Because around here, karma always hits different.